Week 11 of fantasy football season. Here's quarterback starts at every matchup this week. New York Jets at the Patriots Thursday Night Football. So once again, Aaron Glenn up to his old shenanigans, not announcing a quarterback. And he's going to wait towards the end of the week once again to do that. But if it's either Justin Fields game last week versus the Cleveland Browns, even though a couple weeks ago at Cincinnati, it was a big game for him, or Tyrod Taylor, both these guys to me aren't really fantasy options. This week it's a tough matchup at New England. I know more weeks than not those Thursday night games are high scoring. But this week, especially with Garrett Wilson now out 3 to 4 weeks, I don't want any part of the quarterback room in fantasy for the Jets, so they both sit. Drake May is start, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's going out there, he's making big-time plays. Is Drake May only in his second season? And this Patriot team 8-2, so this week in a good matchup versus the Jets with no Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner, who they traded off, obviously, at the deadline. He's a must-start. Washington Commanders, Miami Dolphins, overseas ball game. Marcus Mariota, he's been a serviceable quarterback in the games he started this season. And in my opinion, his left arm, not his throwing arm with the dislocated elbow. Well, right now, this Commander team is 3-7. And even if they win this ball game at 4-7, they're out. They're not going to come back and make a run for the playoffs, most likely. And like I said, Mariota's going out there, and he's keeping them in most games. So this week, he's a start versus Miami and Tua, a fringe option. Tua, it's just like every other game. It's one good game, one bad game for Tua. So him and Jalen Waddle all locked in. Devon Achane having a monster season out of the backfield. But besides that, there's not much going on in this Miami Dolphin offense. So this week, even versus a bad Commander defense with Lattimore out for the season as well, he's a fringe option. Los Angeles Chargers at the Jaguars, Justin Herbert, one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy football this season. And obviously, when you got playmakers all over the field, Ladd McConkey, obviously, Quentin Johnson, Keenan Allen, even though his numbers have dropped the last couple of weeks, and Rondé Gatson, if he gives it a go in this ball game, and even Vidal out of the backfield, it makes everything easier. And Justin Herbert, we always knew he had great talent, and this season it's really coming out with all these good playmakers around him and good coaching staff. So this week in a good matchup at Jacksonville, he's a must-start. Trevor Lawrence is it. Trevor Lawrence, I just don't see it with Lawrence. A lot of bad plays still, holding on to the football too much, turning over the football as well. And this Los Angeles Charger defense, they get after it. We saw what they did to Pittsburgh, where Aaron Rodgers, he had no time to throw, and the pass rush was all in his face. So this week, I still could see Lawrence put up some points, but not enough to be a starter. And like I said, Lawrence, it just hasn't been a great year for him this season. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Buffalo Bills, this could be a high-scoring game in Buffalo. Baker Mayfield, he's a start each and every week, even with guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin down in the receiving room for this Tampa Bay Buc team. Baker Mayfield's going out there, still making plays with the guys he has in Emeka Egbuka, Tez Johnson, K-Dot, and Rashad White out of the backfield. So this week in Buffalo, with defense that just couldn't stop Dolphins offense, where they only have two good players and a mediocre quarterback, Baker a must start. Josh Allen a must start. He was first, second quarterback off the board in fantasy leagues. And you know, Allen, more weeks than not, he's going to bring it 30-plus fantasy points. And coming off a bad game and a bad loss in Miami, I think this week with Tampa Bay coming in and their defense that can't really stop anyone, he's a must-start. Obviously, Chicago Bears at the Minnesota Vikings, Caleb Williams a start. Last week, another big game for Caleb Williams. And this Ben Johnson offense has been a nice thing to see for the Chicago Bear team. They're putting up points. They're explosive. They've won some high-scoring ball games, even going back to Week 9, 47-42. And last week, a come-from-behind victory versus the New York Giants. So this week, out of Minnesota defense, that isn't all that great. And their offense is putting their defense in bad positions, especially in last week's game. Caleb is a start. J.J. McCarthy is sit. They're going to score some points as Minnesota, but also there's going to be a lot of turnovers, I believe, and a lot of sacks that McCarthy's going to take in this ball game. And that's the type of defense this bad defense plays. They're going to take chances, but they're going to get to the quarterback. They're going to get their interceptions and fumble recoveries. And this week, I think it's going to be a long day here for McCarthy. He's a sit. Green Bay Packers, New York Giants, Jordan Love, I'll give him a starting nod in this week's ball game. I know this week he could be down Romeo Doubs as well in the receiving room. We'll see if Matthew Golden returns to the lineup. But either way, I think Jordan Love, even with Tucker Kraft out for the season, this week in a good matchup at the New York Giants, he could go out there and get the job done as Jordan Love. We know he's got a big arm. We know he's got a good IQ with the quarterback position. The only thing with Love is he's not as aggressive sometimes. So this week at New York, after losing 2 in a row for this Packer team, in a bad game it was for him, where he didn't even pass a touchdown and had a little over 150 yards passing in that game for Jordan Love. I think he bounces back. He's a start. Jackson Dart, he's a start each and every week with his rushing ability is Jackson Dart. But the thing is, he got concussed in last week's ball game at the Chicago Bears. So if he can't give it a go, Russell Wilson will be the starting quarterback with Dart. All season long with limited weapons, he's gone out there and made plays. If he passes the concussion protocol test, he's a start. And Russell Wilson, we've seen him this season. 2 out of 3 bad games. Week 2, we had a monster game, 450 yards, 3 touchdowns, but that was versus a bad Dallas Cowboy defense. But this week versus one of the better defenses in the league, I wouldn't trust Russell Wilson if he gets the start, so he's an easy sit in this one with limited offensive options as well. Houston Texans at the Tennessee Titans. CJ Stroud, we'll see if he comes back from the concussion. But last week, Davis Mills led the comeback down 19 in the fourth quarter versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. So this week, a slam dunk matchup versus the Tennessee Titans. But CJ Stroud, he just hasn't been good this season. And I think this could be a ball game where they're up early and often because of their defense. And they're just going to run the football a whole lot at Tennessee. So if Stroud's in, he's a fringe option for me. And Davis Mills, even though it was a good game last week, they had no choice but to throw the football 45, 50 times in that one. So Mills this week at Tennessee's a sit, especially with only 2 teams on bye. And Cam Ward, tough rookie season it's been for Cam Ward. This Titan team, one of the worst teams in the league. 1 win under the belt this season. And no one's really helped Cam Ward in the receiving game. So this week he's a sit versus a good Texan defense. Carolina Panthers at the Atlanta Falcons. Bryce Young, he's a sit for me in this ball game is Bryce Young. It's been an up and down year, but also there's limited options in this offense. But besides Tator McMillan, we've seen nothing pretty much from Leggett, Jalen Coker, and Jatavian Sanders. So this week in a matchup versus a Falcon defense, they're going to give their points up, but also as well, they get to the quarterback. They create turnovers, and Bryce Young needs a sit. Michael Penix, a fringe option. This is Carolina defense. They're middle of the pack to poor defense. That a slam dunk matchup in last week's game versus New Orleans Saints, and they couldn't even win that ball game was Carolina. So Penix, him and Drake London are locked in. Bijan Robinson, good receiver out of the backfield as well. We haven't seen much from Mooney. And also, I know Kyle Pitts' numbers have gone down a little bit the last couple weeks. But to me, in a decent matchup and back home is Atlanta, he's a fringe option. Cincinnati Bengals at the Pittsburgh Steelers. We saw a high-scoring ball game a few weeks ago between Joe Flacco and Aaron Rodgers. Both quarterbacks 40-plus. So Joe Flacco, when you got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Chase Brown out of the backfield, it makes everything easier. And this week, even in a tough matchup versus a tough defense of the Steelers, Joe Flacco will start. And Aaron Rodgers a start. I know Rodgers last week, he did nothing besides a late garbage time touchdown at the Chargers in Week 10. But Rodgers, he had a big game, 4 touchdowns a few weeks ago versus the same Cincinnati defense where they can't stop anyone. And I like both these grizzled vets as starts this week. San Francisco 49ers at the Arizona Cardinals. Mac Jones, if he's going to start once again in this game, he's a fringe option to me. Mac Jones, he's getting the football out. He's making plays. Obviously, they got Juwan Jennings. He's having a decent season. George Kittle, obviously one of the best tight ends in the league. And also Christian McCaffrey is going to do his thing out of the backfield catching the football. So this week in an okay matchup, even though this Cardinal defense, it wasn't really their fault much in that ball game where the offense turned it over a couple times versus Seattle. And that's obviously where the game got out of hand. And it wasn't much. But I think Mac Jones or Brock Purdy, whoever it is, versus a mediocre defense of the Cardinals, their fringe options. Jacoby Brissett, he's a start for me in this game. Brissett, it just seems like this offense, they like dropping back and throwing the football a ton of times. Even we saw it in the Week 9 ball game where they were leading the majority of the game versus the Dallas Cowboys. They were just dropping back and throwing a whole lot and not running the football a lot. So Brissett, he's got that gunslinger mentality. And when you got 2 good playmakers leading the way, obviously like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride, you could do things like that. So Brissett, he's playing freely out there. He's had 20 or more fantasy points in 4 starts in a row. And this week, versus a banged-up San Francisco defense with no Bosa and Warner for the season, he's a start. Seattle Seahawks at the Los Angeles Rams. Sam Darnold, it's been a solid season for him for the most part. But this week here at the Rams, it's a tough matchup. And Darnold, he's had his turnover problems here and there for this Seattle Seahawks team. So this week at Los Angeles, division matchup, to me, he's a fringe option where last week they scored all those points with Seattle, and we didn't see much out of Darnold in that one. Matthew Stafford to start. Matthew Stafford, he's having an MVP type of season, believe it or not. But when you got 2 stud receivers like Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, you're going to go out there and put points on the board. So this week, even if Adams is out, Matthew Stafford, I still believe, goes out there, and the way he plays in this McVay system, he's putting up big points weekly. Kansas City Chiefs at the Denver Broncos. Patrick Mahomes, he's a start for me in this game. He's having an MVP type of season once again, and he's got a full arsenal of playmakers now. Rashee Rice, he's been back the last couple of weeks. Xavier Worthy, he's going to get healthier coming off the bye. Travis Kelce, Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster. So I know the running game hasn't been great, but that's even better for Patrick Mahomes to throw the football, and we've been seeing him run the football pretty well this season. So this week, even in a tough matchup versus one of the better defenses in the league in Denver, he's a start. Bo Nix a sit for me. Bo Nix, I just don't like the way he's coming out in these games. I know he's had some big games with Bo Nix, but the luck ran out a little bit last week in terms of fantasy points, where he got off to a slow start and they couldn't do much all week, game long versus the Vegas Raiders, where Bo Nix only finished up with under 8 fantasy points. So this week, they're going to bring the heat. In this one is Steve Spagnuolo. Kansas City, this is a big game for them, coming off a bye week and trying to create ground in the division. So I just don't see Bo Nix going out there and really doing much in this ball game. I could be wrong, but like I said, he's throwing too much out of the pocket, too much across his body, and he's holding on to the football at times too much as well. Baltimore Ravens at the Cleveland Browns. Lamar Jackson, he's a start for me in this game. Obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And now this Raven team, they will want 3 in a row. And this week it's a good matchup at Cleveland. I know Cleveland, they got a good defense on paper, and obviously the best pass rusher in the league in Myles Garrett. But teams are still putting points on the board, and I expect that from Lamar Jackson in this Raven offense. Dylan Gabriel is hit. I thought he's been decent at times as Dylan Gabriel in his rookie season. Obviously Flacco, they benched him early in the year, traded him away to the Cincinnati Bengals. With Dylan Gabriel, the only thing with him, he don't take a lot of deep shots down the field. Last week he did take a couple, and he hit Jerry Jeudy on one of them in the end zone. But this week in a matchup versus a Baltimore defense that's getting healthier, and they can make this offense one-dimensional pretty quick if they get off to a 10, 14-point lead. He's a sit this week. Sunday night, Detroit Lions at the Philadelphia Eagles. Jared Goff in this offense, they turned things up a little bit last week at the Commanders, and now Dan Campbell, he was the play caller after he wasn't happy from the output of the offense, and they went out there and they put up 40-plus on the board, and Jared Goff had a big game, 3 touchdowns, over 300 yards, and when you got guys like St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, and Gibbs out of the backfield, it makes your job easier. This week, even in a tough matchup in Philadelphia that just shut down the Packers to 7 points, I still will put Goff in the lineup. He's a start, and Jalen Hurts a start for me as well in this ball game. I know Jalen Hurts, it was a down game for him. Had a fumble in that game, only threw 1 touchdown, but it was a big one. That was the difference to Devonta Smith on a long one on a 3rd down conversion. So Jalen Hurts, we know he's a good player. We know at home he's been a better quarterback than he's been on the road. And this week, with a banged-up Lions secondary coming in, even after coming off a mid-game for Jalen Hurts, he's a start. Final game of the week, Dallas Cowboys at the Vegas Raiders on Monday night. Dak Prescott having an MVP type of season. I know a couple weeks ago, week 9 versus the Cardinals, he had a bad game as Dak Prescott. But I think this week he bounces back, and it's a great matchup at the Las Vegas Raiders. The defense that can't stop anyone, even though they held their own in that Week 10 game versus the Denver Broncos. But I still think Dak Prescott, coming off the bye week, CeeDee Lamb a little bit healthier, George Pickens having a good year. You got Ferguson and Williams. He goes out there and has a good game. And Geno Smith, he's a sit for me in this ball game. Geno Smith, it's been a bad season in his first year in Vegas. A lot of turnovers, which we haven't seen for him over the last couple seasons in Seattle. But this year, it's just been a bad year, even in a good matchup versus a bad Cowboy defense. He's a sit this week. So that's quarterback start, sit every matchup for Week 11 of the fantasy football season.